Welcome, everyone, to the Trailblazing Leaders podcast. It's my goal to bring you insights and wisdom from some of the most exceptional leaders in business today. Leaders who have a track record of driving outstanding business growth by having a deep passion for attracting, developing, and retaining great talent. During each episode, my guests will be sharing their expertise, stories, and innovations covering a range of trailblazing leadership topics, such as their philosophy of team leadership, the art and science of creating a great organizational culture, plus what they recommend for up-and-coming trailblazing leaders. Please stay with us to the end of today's program, where I'll be sharing how you can get a special leadership gift. It is with great excitement and pleasure that I get to introduce to you Sean Riches, founder of Erskine Nash Associates, based in London. Sean's firm specializes in helping clients with the challenges of perfecting team performance. And later on, we'll find out more about how he and his team actually do this and how you might be able to learn from his techniques and use them in your own teams. Sean leverages his extensive experience spanning over 20 years across various sectors, including financial services, as an officer in the British Army, and in international airport operations. His firm works in a wide array of organizations and sectors, including automotive, technology, aviation, finance, and retail, with brand name clients including Vodafone, Accenture, Paramount Pictures, and NBC Universal. Sean and his team have collectively worked with over 100 nationalities in more than 25 countries across America, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Sean lives in the southwest of London with his wife and two sons. He enjoys the outdoor life, such as what we call hiking. He calls it hill walking, and I do love him for our difference, and camping. He also works with the Royal Marines on youth outreach programs, working with young people from the inner city to help develop their personal confidence, team working, and leadership skills. And I am so fortunate to have met Sean and be able to call him a mentor, a coach, a colleague, and a friend. Together, we are designing and implementing various unique team leadership programs and succession planning workshops for large tech and manufacturing organizations. Sean, I am so excited to have you on the show, as you know, and I love the fact that we get to talk about our favorite topic, high performance teaming. So let's just start with your company, Erskine Nash. What is it that you do?
Thank you, Russell, and thank you for inviting me on. It's a real pleasure. So actually what we do is pretty simple. Our strap line on our logo actually says it all, which a good strap line should do. Perfecting team performance. So our proposition is that if you work in a team, or you lead a team, or a team of teams, and you need that team to be better, or you want it to be better, then we can help you. So we help you take your team from A, where it is now, to B, where you want to be in the future. Yeah.
And Sean, I think you're so modest in that. The fact that you work with teams across countries and cultures, I think gives you a very unique insight in the differences of how you work with people. Maybe you could speak to that international commonality and international differences that you've experienced.
Yeah. I've worked, I think, as far west so far as Colorado, Denver in Colorado. I've worked as far east as Singapore, Hong Kong. I've worked as far south as Johannesburg in South Africa, and as far north. We haven't gone that far. I mean, we are north anyway, yeah, but in the world. But I think the furthest north I've worked is Edinburgh in Scotland. There are some other places that I could work, and I've worked in Moscow as well. That's probably further north. I don't know. I've worked with certainly over 90 nationalities, maybe 100 now. I gave up counting a long time ago.
Yes,
everything from Austrian to Zimbabwean and everything in between. And undoubtedly there are cultural differences. If you show up in Dublin, Ireland, trying to do business the same way that you do in Munich, then good luck with that. You know, there are differences. There are definitely differences. However, I delight in also finding the commonalities that make human beings what we are, and we all have very similar kind of frailties and concerns, and Certainly if someone is a parent, if doesn't matter where they're from in the world, if they're a parent, they've got kids, my kids are 18 and 15, so, been around a few years. We've been through the baby, the toddler, the tweenie, or whatever they call themselves, the teenage years, and we're getting ready for university and stuff. Anybody that's in any of that, you can find commonality. So I find there is more that we have in common than differences. And if you can find that common humanity, you're up and running.
How about just for fun? How about the big difference between the Americans and the Brits, as you call them? We've learned our cultural differences by working together.
Yeah. And by the way, we're recording this podcast on the 6th of June.
Yes.
Which is the anniversary of D-Day, the 80th anniversary right today, which is one of the biggest examples of Anglo-American collaboration in the history of the world. And we should try and keep that going for the rest of this podcast.
Okay. Well, we are
the biggest difference.
We will. We have our strength.
The biggest difference, I think, is humor, sense of humor. And us Brits use humor in a very different way from Americans, and we think it's really funny, and then we realize that sometimes it hasn't landed, and in fact it may have been interpreted as genuinely harmful. So you have to be careful, and the biggest problem is that we speak almost a common language. We're two societies divided by a common language, and so we can say something in English that means something very subtle to us, but we think everybody knows what we mean, and apparently it means completely the opposite in the rest of the world, and that's a toughie. So humor and the apparent commonality of language, which is actually false, I think is a big problem.
And just we'll go back to our teaming, but one of the things I learned and I love so much is and you'll elaborate, from a British standpoint, it's what we don't say that's important. And from the American perspective, it's, we're going to say everything.
Oh, yeah. British people, and it's not just British people, but we do really do it very, very, in a very extreme ways. We very rarely say exactly what we mean, but we rely on the person at the receiving end to decode what we said and understood what we meant, which is often different. It is very much not a literal communication style. So if a Brit says to you, that's interesting, that can mean one of 50 different things, only one of which means he's genuinely interested. The other 49 normally mean he's not interested at all, he disagrees with you profoundly, or whatever it is.
So I think we'll come back to, as we talk about communication styles and assumption and coaching and mentoring and direction, how important understanding language is and how it lands. So let's go to the aspect of, if someone has a team that wants you to help make them more effective, how do you do it? What has created your success in helping teams, perfecting teams?
Well, I guess the first rule in any consulting role is, don't jump to assumptions, find out what's really going on, question, engage with stakeholders. And that's true in any form of consulting, even in engineering consulting. Of course, you've got to get in there and find out what's really going on beneath the scenes, beneath the surface. Our approach, however, is based on a very simple model, which you are familiar with, called the CAB model, CAB. And this was born of a realization that all of our clients are real busy. They're all really, really, really busy people. And if you offer them something that is complex and multi-layered and sophisticated, they often haven't got the appetite or the time to do that. They want something a bit simpler. And as long as it's effective, then there's no need to dress it up. And by the way, I think this is something which I really admire about Americans. In particular, American academia can express very sophisticated concepts in very simple language. Unfortunately, my experience in the UK is that our academics do the opposite of that. And I'm a big fan of American academics in the worlds of leadership and management. So we try and take a more of an American approach. So the CAB model basically says, if you go online and search for how do I improve my team, or you walk into a bookstore and ask for all the books about team effectiveness, stand by. You're going to be there for years reading it all. There are probably thousands of things you can do to get the best from a team. The trouble is you haven't got time for that. So we identified the three that seem to make the most difference. And that's CAB, clarity, alignment, and behavior. So when we are working with a team, and that could be the exec board of a big PLC, it could be a small team of some kind, we generally say you want to make improvements in clarity, in alignment, and in behavior. And if you can achieve those, you're going to pretty much achieve the results you want. There are other things you could do, but do yourself a favor and focus on those three.
So I think it's worth to take a step down, because your definition of clarity, as we talked about, understanding what that word means and how you describe clarity, and also how you describe alignment to change behavior, is essential to your success. So let's just take the time necessary. When you say clarity, what do you mean? And when you say alignment, what do you mean?
Okay. So by clarity, we're talking about the destination that your team is aiming for. So it might be expressed as a purpose, a mission, an objective, a target, or all of those. But fundamentally, it's a measure of to what degree does everyone in this team fully understand and commit to, emotionally as well as logically, the end state that we're trying to aim for. And a lot of teams, we say to people, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being no one's got a clue, there's no, everyone's all over the place, and a 10 being quite a worrying degree of agreement, which suggests you've got a cult rather than a team. Where on that scale do you think you are? And most teams will say, yeah, we're pretty good on that. We're like a 7 or an 8 or a 9. And you go, okay, let's test that out. And it's really easy to test. And any of the people listening could do this with their team. You ask everybody the same question, which is, what's our purpose or our mission, or what's our objective, or what's our priority by the end of this month, this quarter, this year, whatever it is. What's the thing that you think everybody should have, not just here, but in here as well, in your heart as well as your brain? And then get them to write those down. Get them to write down the answers and then display all the answers. And in our experience, you will get as many answers as there are people in the room or on the call. It's really scary. And sometimes chief execs or communications directors will then scratch their heads and say, hang on, we told everybody this at the roadshow 3 months ago, or we sent out the email, or whatever it is. And we can show time and time again that within 10 minutes of telling a team something, and everybody hears the same thing, if you then go up to them with a video camera and ask them the question, it's amazing when you play the video back to people and they just see all these people coming up giving completely different answers.
Yeah. I think it's incredible. We too often assume just because we transmitted a piece of information, both visually and verbally, that it was, as you say, decoded or encoded in our brain in all the same ways. It's the game of telephone. Yeah. And so
exactly.
I love the fact that when you videotape them, it's like, okay, here's proof positive. We do not have clarity.
Yeah. I think it was George Bernard Shaw, the Irish playwright, and I will mangle this quote, so don't take this word for word, but he said something like, the problem with communication is the illusion that it worked. So in other words, we communicate and we say, that's it, my job here is done. It must have landed. Everyone will have understood it. My work here is done. And it's if you go back round, behind the scenes and then test it, that's when you find out that life isn't as simple as that. So our first intervention with a team would be to check how healthy clarity is.
Okay.
And we would normally ask we'll explain what we mean by clarity, which you've already heard. We'll ask them as individuals to rate where they think they are, and most members will say, yeah, pretty high. Then we test it, and they often realize that their scores were woefully optimistic.
Yeah.
And that's because they haven't put sufficient time and energy and effort into achieving clarity, or they've assumed that they only need to do it once, and that's it, the miracle is achieved.
Yes.
Or that it doesn't require regular recommunication, and because leaders are too busy doing stuff, and we'll get onto that later. They don't see the need to re-clarify again and again, which unfortunately seems to be necessary.
Well, what's I think is, as coming from the marketing world, we know we repeat messages dozens and dozens of times to land, but all too often leaders just assume I say it once, everybody's got it. So now you've identified a team that has a clarity problem. Let's talk about what it means by alignment.
Yeah. So we'll try and get the score up higher. And I think the client that we've worked with the longest on this, and we got them from an average score of 4 some years ago to 8.5 now. And it's almost like once you hit 8.5 out of 10, you're kind of like, that's the marginal gain is going to be really tough now. And you've got to question whether you need it to be. The people are going to have different interpretations at an individual level, and that's cool. 8.5 is fine. Alignment, the word alignment is often used synonymously with clarity. People say, people are clear about it and they're aligned with it. It's no, you can be real clear about something, but not aligned. All right. Yeah.
Tell us. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, pick your least favorite politician. You may be very clear what their politics are. Doesn't mean to say you're aligned with it. All right. Clarity and alignment are totally different. We won't go any further into that. Given this election year in all of our countries. Yeah. Alignment, what we mean by alignment is not the destination, it's the journey. In other words, how people, how different teams, how different functions, how different departments are working alongside each other, and how much friction is there between those moving parts. So to paint a simple picture, I could get a group of people into a room and say, we're going to create some clarity. Our objective is that we're all at Trafalgar Square in the middle of London, where the Nelson's column is, at 2:00 tomorrow afternoon. And certainly anyone that lives in London will know where that is, what it looks like, and how to get there. It's like Times Square in New York or whatever. In fact, as a Londoner, you probably don't go there. Just the same as New Yorkers don't go to Times Square, but let's just say you did, right? Everyone's got perfect clarity. 2:00 tomorrow, Trafalgar Square, Times Square, wherever. Then we all rush out the door at the same time. Well, the door is only that big and there's like 10 of us trying to get out, and we trip each other up. There's massive friction. We're blocked in the door and there's like a fight breaking out to get out of the door. That's what we mean by alignment, or in this case, a lack of alignment. So the second thing we do is try to maximize the level of alignment between individuals or between sub-teams or between teams. So you will know, Russell, based on your experience, that in many organizations, the level of alignment between the marketing function and the sales function is not all that we would wish for.
No, that's a long problem. Marketing and sales alignment is consistently at issue and at odds with each other.
Yeah, they might be real clear about the number with a dollar sign that everyone's got to achieve by the end of the financial year or the quarter, but that doesn't mean to say that their plans and activities are aligned with each other. They may actually be mutually exclusive. What this team, if this team succeeds, this team are going to fail. I mean, that's horrible, that degree of competition within an organization. More often than not, different teams or departments are fighting each other for the glamorous stuff, and there's a big gap where nobody wants to do the less glamorous stuff, and everyone is conveniently assuming that someone else is going to take care of it.
Yeah, so I was just on a call the other day, and that's that's not my job. Well, I don't want to do that job. No. So let's talk about what does great alignment look like, and then we'll talk about behavior. So you have great alignment when?
So great alignment occurs in two ways. what we would call vertical alignment and then horizontal alignment. Vertical alignment is pretty simple. Is each person or each team aligned with the objective? So hopefully by now we're real clear about what the objective is. But again, in corporate life, we know there are people, there are teams, there are departments, there are functions who are putting time and energy into stuff that appears to be completely unrelated to the objective. It's like, why are you wasting your time on that? Now, it may be a misunderstanding on our part, or it might be they just like doing that.
Right? Talk about
So there's a lack of vertical alignment. In our organization, having agreed an outcome, we then want everyone to kind of focus on that and spend their time and energy at work and the money that we give them achieving that, not achieving some other stuff that they've dreamt up, right? So that's a lack of vertical alignment. That tends not to happen that much in most well-managed organizations, but even the best led and best managed organization tend to have a problem with horizontal alignment. And horizontal alignment is where the relationships between different individuals, different functions or teams is either has overlaps where they're fighting each other for the same resources or the same territory, or there are underlaps where there's just gaps in the operation and no one's going near there because no one wants to do it. It's difficult. It's not glamorous. The last time we tried it, it went wrong, so someone else is going to take care of it. And that's where they're not aligned. And that's where the way that we will try and get that score up towards 10, if we're using that scoring mechanism, is have each person or each function or each team present their plans, not just to the boss so that he or she can check that, yeah, what you're doing makes sense to me, but they've got to kind of do it in front of each other so that they can listen to the plans and activities of each of their fellow functions or departments and listen out for those overlaps and underlaps and the assumptions. Like the marketing people are assuming that the salespeople are going to do something, whereas like the salespeople are, we aren't going to be doing that, or vice versa.
So
that's what we mean about horizontal alignment.
Okay, so we have clarity, we have alignment, and they overlap, and in the middle sits behavior. So is behavior a result of good clarity alignment, or is a behavior something that you develop?
Yeah. Great question. So I think oftentimes we are asked to go into a team or an organization where there is stress, there is bad feeling. Maybe that's overt. Maybe everybody just knows it's going on underneath the surface. And sometimes people will come in and go, can you come and do some stuff with our team to make people happier? To kind of create some team spirit, a bit of team bonding.
Some Dixie dust around here, would you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's at a behavioral level. Can you just help people be nicer to each other and behave themselves? And the answer is no. Actually, that's not what we do. What we want to do is we want to assess your clarity and your alignment first, because if you've got problems at a behavioral level, that's normally the result of a lack of clarity and almost certainly a lack of alignment. In other words, taking people away for a couple of days off-site and doing some fun stuff is going to probably solve your behavior problems for as long as that event lasts. But the effect will be very temporary because the underlying causes, which are a lack of clarity and a lack of alignment, haven't been fixed. So guess what? We go back into the same situation.
Yeah.
So we would always want to prioritize clarity and alignment first. And if you can improve the health of clarity and alignment in a team, you oftentimes get an improvement in behavior and relationships for free as a result of your work on clarity and alignment. Right. But you then do need to work at the behavioral level as well. And we do a lot of that kind of work as well. But you got to sort clarity and alignment first.
If you get healthy scores around clarity and alignment, this is the big issue. How do you maintain it? Because people regress, they go to their natural behaviors. What is your methodology for maintaining that?
So initially, when we're working with the team, we'll try and address clarity first, then alignment, and then we will go into the behavioral level. And again, some of the stuff you can do around behavior can be pretty simple. So the first thing we'll do is build relatedness. Relatedness is simply the degree of closeness and mutual understanding that people have. So if you know someone well, you understand their personality, you know what makes them tick, and they also understand something about you. That means it's just easier to work with them. You know what to avoid, what to say, how to approach them, and things just run a bit easier. So we will generally try and help team members to get to know each other better. And in the days of hybrid working or distance working, it's getting tougher to do that. You know, when we all used to go to the office or what have you, we get to know each other kind of for free, organically.
Yes.
Whereas now organizations are having to put more time and energy and effort, money sometimes, into making sure that those events do happen. So that's where we would start with behavior. I then think self-awareness is a real gift and a foundation of behavioral effectiveness. And we will use psychometrics, you know, where you fill in a questionnaire and it produces a report that tells you about your personality or your behavioral preferences. But more importantly, you get to understand those of the people around you as well.
Yes.
And as long as you are then helped to turn that into action, and that's the bit that often doesn't happen, you can get some real benefits from that. What shouldn't happen is you fill in the questionnaire, you get a report, and you know what your color is or what your letters are or what have you, and everyone walks around going, yes, I lead with the red behavior or the blue behavior or the green behavior or the yellow behavior, or I am an ENTJ or an ISTJ or whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, okay, so what? What are you going to do about it? And the work that we do will often plot all members of a team on a single visual and say, hey, you people are up here and you people tend to be down here and you are down here and you are down here. How are you going to work with those ones over there? The people that are very different from you. Because as irritating as you find them, they're finding the same of you as well. So building up that self-awareness, but then helping people to know what to do with it.
Yeah. So what I have found is that mapping of both communication style and then strengths or maybe geniuses or whatever the tools might be gives you the perspective of difference. And then just while you can guide them and tell them what to do, what we have found is that it requires practice. You know, I think it's too often we think if we expose someone to a concept, a behavior, a methodology, it lands, just like we've talked about, the alignment of the clarity of the goal. But no athlete or professional doesn't succeed without practice and coaching. And so I think too often I see organizations do one of these exercises, do a communication, and then don't maintain the long-term coaching for behavioral mastery.
I totally agree. I think of all of our current clients, the one that has derived the most benefit, and I would advise, you know, all clients and potential clients to do this, is they have maintained a degree of momentum around this. So every year, the chief executive will ask us to go in and run a clarity and alignment workshop for his entire organization. In other words, let's review what we did this year. Let's ensure there's crystal clear clarity about where we need to be by the end of next year. Let's hear about the plans and activities, and let's align with each other to make sure that we have a coherent plan. And that is a clarity and alignment workshop. And they do that twice a year, once to get ready for the new financial year, and then halfway through the year, they re-clarify and they realign. And that's necessary. You've got new people joining the team. The context has changed. They work in a political environment. We're almost certainly going to have a new government soon. And things change in the environment. The economy changes. So you need to re-clarify and realign. And he's been doing that now for 5 years, you know, every year. On the behavioral side, again, merely exposing someone to a concept of this is what good behavior looks like doesn't make us do it. And even if we then do start living the dream and behaving in that way, it's not long before, particularly under stress or when we're tired, we revert to type.
Yes.
If I ruled the world, if I was king of the world, I think I would have every. Yeah, it's a matter of time. If I would have every human being have what we would in the UK would call an MOT test. I don't know what you do in the US, but if you have a car that's an automobile that's 3 years old or more, then every year by law, it has to have someone needs to check it. There's a certain number of checks, and it gets signed off as it's still street legal, and you can only get insurance and tax for it if you've got this certificate. Yeah, so there's a thing, and it's like your car gets looked at, and someone kind of examines it and tests it for its appropriateness to be on the road and in public every year. And I think I would have benefited from that. And I think I know a lot of people who would benefit from it. So coming back to our client, the client I'm talking about, every year, not only do they do 2 clarity and alignment workshops, but they then have 2 team development workshops, not looking at objectives and plans, but looking at, hey, us as a team, how are we getting on? How's our culture doing as a team? Let's assess that. What's working? What do we need to address? Reminding people that sometimes the behavior that they come hardwired with is not always appropriate with everyone in every situation, and we need to be flexible and we need to practice that. So it is an ongoing thing. And by the way, that chief exec took that team over 5 years ago, and I think it was scoring on the CAB model something like 4, 2, 3. So clarity was 4, alignment was 3, 2, something like that, and the behavior was 3. They are now at 8.5, 7.5, 8.5. And I've said, that's the best I've ever seen. And that's amazing. And trying to get much more marginal gain out of that is going to be tough.
So I think I want to close this section with, you've made it very simple for a leader to bring a team together. And I think the simplicity is its power. While there are dozens and dozens of tests and processes, and we have lots of them, when you think about, I'm going to bring everyone together and we're going to run a workshop or I'm going to have a mid-year check-in, the fact that is, hey, how clear are we your goal? Write it down, let's videotape and see. It's such a simple action, but such a powerful action. And so I think power comes from the simplicity. I just want to put a bow on that one piece, and that your CAB model does that so beautifully. And I'm grateful that you have exposed it to me and to all the listeners today. I want to now go to you that sometimes you're asked to not work with a particular team, but to work with multiple leaders of multiple teams. So now the question that I think arises is, how do you equip those leaders, in essence, train the leaders to go back to work with their teams using the techniques we just talked about? How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Our preference would always to work with an intact team, with every member of that team, and hold their hand and help them over a period of time. But obviously, some organizations are very big, and they want to have that impact secondhand. So they say to us, can you take our leaders and do some leadership development with them, teach them how to do what you would do, so that they can go back and work with their teams, kind of, achieve the effect secondhand. Through them. And so we will design and facilitate leadership development programs which equip those delegates with a greater range of tools and skills to go back and achieve this with their own teams. And the beauty of that is we're teaching them to apply the same tools that we do for real anyway. In other words, half of our business is doing this for real, and half of it is teaching other people to do it. So when we recommend it because next week we're going to use it, or last week we actually did it with a team.
Yeah. And that could be, I think we talked about staying to the end of the program. I know we will provide that if you'd like, as some of Sean's tools that you could apply on your own, because I can give you the recipe, but there's still the art of cooking the recipe. And so we want to, yeah. You and I are both committed to helping the world have great teams. So I think you're willing to offer some of your tools out to the market.
Yeah, absolutely. When we design a leadership development program, again, it's not just a sheep dip. It's not just a one experience and then, hey, you're fixed now. Go back into the world and achieve amazing things. Unfortunately, human beings aren't made like that. I know I'm not, and I'm pretty sure you aren't as well. No. So our leadership development programs will mix some one-to-one coaching and mentoring so that people can express themselves confidentially and talk about issues that perhaps they don't want to talk about publicly. We'll absolutely have some experiential workshops where we bring people together and practice using some of the tools in a safe environment on kind of simulations. It's the gamification of learning, where if it goes wrong, it doesn't matter. In fact, you will learn more by getting it wrong than you will by getting it right. And so we'll give people a project to do. They apply some of the tools, and in over an hour, they'll see whether it works. And then they'll do a retro or a review afterwards and say, well, what went well? What we do differently? They bank some learning. And then we say, great, have another project, which is, again, another game, another team challenge. But now try and apply another tool to it, a new one, and see what happens then. And over a period of time, they build up this toolkit, which isn't just a toolkit, but they've practiced using those tools for real. And after 2 days or so, most people will have reached the peak of learning. So they go back to work, and we then would schedule some one-to-one coaching with them to help them apply it to the real world. And then maybe a month later, we bring them back for another 2 days. And guess what? The first thing that everyone has to do is report back on, this is what I tried. This worked. This didn't work. My team loved this. That didn't work so well. And we keep adding some more tools, giving them the opportunity to practice. And then, of course, a couple of weeks later, we do another one-to-one coaching or mentoring session with them to help them apply those ones. And over time, you are slowly letting go of their hand and letting them walk alone. But it's not a cliff edge. It's a shallow beach where you're slowly giving them more and more freedom to apply these things for themselves.
So in essence, or in summary, is you're training leaders how to deploy these tactics for teams and share. Yep. You give them skill sets in workshop and then let them go to apply on the job, and then bring them back and deepen the skill set, let them go again, open up more and more, because it's the repetitive practice and the on-the-job learning. We know adult learning is most effective 70% when it's on the job, 20% when we're doing exercises in a workshop, and 10% when you hear something. And so I think the key concept in training trainers or training leaders to then take it to scale is this consistent on-the-job application and reinforcement process. Yeah. Otherwise, it's destined for failure.
And it is really noticeable. In fact, I was doing it today. I had some one-to-one mentoring calls with some delegates we were working with a few weeks ago. And often those one-to-one sessions will consist of me saying, what is bothering you right now? What's the biggest challenge you've got right now? And that's normally a person. It's a relationship with a client or a boss or a colleague or a direct report. I go, right, let's talk about that person. And they'll describe the challenge, and then I'm nearly always able to say, do you remember on the workshop that we ran 3 weeks ago, we did this? And they're like, yeah, absolutely remember that. Okay, I think that's going to help you. Let's talk about how you're going to apply that tool or that technique to this challenge. But they need that connection back into the real world. If a client says to me, we only want to pay for the workshops, we don't want the one-to-one sort of mentoring bit in between, I'm kind of like, I'm not sure I want to do this piece of work.
Yeah. Well, because you're not going to get the behavior change. And I think that leads right into this next question, which is, what are the red flags in L&D efforts that are signals that you're not, that don't make the investment, you're not going to get the behavior change, you're not going to be the objective? I think we discussed one red flag, which is, if you don't have the resources, commitment, and passion for long-term skill mastery, don't even begin. Right? That's what I'm hearing. But I'm assuming you've seen many other red flags.
Yeah, that first one is about the mix. There is no one single method of training or development that's gonna address it. You've got to have a mix, and that includes one-to-one work and experiential development, and maybe some psychometrics as well. And you normally need a lot of that. The second one is where you get an organization that says, can you help us improve the quality of our leadership? And we say, yes, of course we can. And they say, great, can you start with this cohort that are one or two levels below the top.
Okay.
And immediately I'm going, why would I start there rather than at the top?
Yep.
Because the implication is, oh, they're perfect. They don't need help. And it's like, well, if they were that perfect, you wouldn't have this problem further down the organization. Yeah. If they were perfect leaders, they probably wouldn't have these problems. And then it's like, oh, they're too busy. And it's like, so they have another problem, which is empowerment and delegation, where they really need help at the top. All right. And, sometimes clients kind of insist that we start at the next level down, or maybe even the level below that. And I always say to them, here's my prediction. And it's a fairly short one because we've been doing this for 18 years now. We've seen it a few times, right? And it's, what's going to happen here is we are going to equip a level of leaders in your organization with a certain common set of concepts and behaviors and language, which they are going to be using with each other. And they're also then going to be using with their people, isolating people above them in the hierarchy who will increasingly feel uncomfortable for two reasons. One is they get a sense that they're being judged from below. Now, they already were anyway, let's face it, yeah?
Yeah.
But the thing is that those people that we've trained and developed are now looking at their bosses going, well, if all this stuff is what good looks like, how come you aren't doing any of it? Okay. But also, the models, the tools, the behaviors that we equip people with enable them to have really meaningful conversations much more easily with each other. And of course, that language isn't shared by the people above them. They feel very excluded from those conversations. So you get this nasty feeling, no one wants to talk to you the way they're talking to others, and you're being judged negatively from below. At which point, the client will come back and say, can you come back and work with our more senior team? So, yeah, that's a big red flag as well.
I find the irony, and we'll close this episode. I want to then have our part 2 come because we have so much to cover. We're still just starting here, is that almost anywhere from 20 to 50% of a business's cost is their labor. And not investing their own time to make themselves, the leaders, better so that their teams are better, which can make their bottom line better, always feels ironic. I'm so busy doing everything other than the single most important thing I should be doing, which is taking care and developing my people and their skills, and by taking care of me. If I make myself and my leadership team better, it just cascades versus, go fix that team over there. So I find that the most ironic thing that you and I both see in organizations. I don't know if you have a closing comment, and I'm going to go into it.
I think many of us, for whatever reason, labor under the illusion that somehow we are going to be okay at leadership, maybe even good at leadership. And the evidence is not that actually, in order to get good at it, you do need to invest time and effort and energy and maybe money in it as well. It isn't. Wishful thinking is not enough.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there may be some natural born leaders out there who are brilliant at it. Certainly there are some people that think they are. I know I'm definitely not one. But I've yet to meet any that wouldn't benefit. I've met a single human being that hasn't benefited or wouldn't benefit from some help with this. It doesn't come naturally, unfortunately.
And I would just close with this. There's not a athlete, an artist, a musician, the best of the best in whatever field, in soccer or basketball, or that doesn't have constant practice to improve their skills, even though they're number one in the world.
Yeah.
And so why is it that we think, we as leaders, we don't need to practice. We don't need coaching. Yeah. We don't need to improve our free throw shooting. It's really a reflection. And because, as we're going to get to in part 2, is everyone's so busy, but they forget the importance. So Sean, we're going to close this piece of the thing. You're going to stay with me. We'll do a part 2. I want to thank everyone for listening to this first episode and discussion and question and answer session with Sean Riches from Erskine and Nash. And please listen to And look out for part 2, where Sean and I continue our conversation, and we're going to go deeper into the trends and insights and advice that is going to help you create better teaming. So thank you so much for today. In this episode with Sean, we covered so many topics. Let me just give you a quick recap of them. I think the most important thing he talked about is the simplicity of helping people understand what is team leadership and how he uses his CAB model, clarity, alignment, and behavior, to improve team effectiveness. And it talked about clarity is that everyone has an understanding of the goal, but it's never assumed, it's constantly checked in. And alignment is everyone understands how we're working together and making sure that we're getting everything covered and not assuming it is covered to accomplish the goal. And when we have clarity and alignment and they overlap, we get new behavior change. I think the second piece he talked about is that you can't assume just because you communicated the goal, it lands. There's so much misinterpretation and distraction in our world. It is important for team leaders to repeat over and over again what is the goal, so that you hit this key piece of clarity and there's no confusion. The third piece we talked about in this first episode was Sean is often asked about working with a secondary team, not the leadership team, to start at a lower level team. And he doesn't like to do that. In his experience is that when he helps lower level teams, eventually those teams now gain a new language, a new lexicon, a new set of insights that begins not intentionally, but starts to alienate the leaders. They feel they're being more judged. And they then start to eventually say, well, God, I need to know what you've taught my other team, so we're all in alignment. So he always recommends starting at the top. All too often, the top feels like, hey, we're not the ones broken, it's the others. Of course, his 18 years of experience has shown that to be not the case. And lastly, in this episode, we talked about how Sean trains large organizations by training the trainer of leaders, by giving them the tools that he uses with a small team, teaching them how to use those tools, letting them apply them on the job to a team, and then coming back in a month and discussing and reviewing how that went, and then deepening and providing more skills, and then going back to the job and applying them. I think Sean and I are both extremely adamant about the importance of consistent coaching and skill development, because that's what makes great performance. Every great athlete is improving their skills constantly with a coach. And so the anomaly is, why do leaders feel they don't need a coach to help improve their skills? Or if you're going to train leaders to develop teams, you must consistently coach them to become better at what they do. So again, a rich topic that we covered in this first episode. Our special gift to you is many of the tools that Sean uses are within the Magnificent Manager Advantage e-guide that I have offered on our website at kernandpartners.com. So I encourage you to go there, and be sure to listen to the next episode, the second part of my conversation with Sean, as we continue on this journey of high performance teaming together. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Trailblazing Leaders podcast. If you want to check out more episodes, you're going to find them on all major streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. The podcast is also available at our website at kernandpartners.com. Thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you on our next episode.